We're so lucky to be able to welcome Carol Hopkins to the stage today. Carol's full bio is in your program, but she's a long-time resident of Mallacoota, which was, as we all know, was very profoundly affected by the 2019-2020 bushfires. She's going to talk to us about Mallacoota's Recovery Association, MADRA, and to share her first-hand knowledge from her involvement in MADRA and in her community. You're going to have a chance to ask Carol some questions after she's finished speaking. So write those notes down or those questions down, just jot them down for yourselves. But we are so thrilled to have you here, Carol, and to hear your story. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And I would like to acknowledge Auntie Carol and the people from this country, and also the traditional owners of the country from where I come, in beautiful Mallacoota. I'm off to a good start. I did not trip up the stairs. I think that's a good start. And so, as Anne has mentioned, I hope that none of my slides will make you feel triggered in any way. I understand that there are other impacted people in the room. I hope not to do that, but of course, this was all a very big part of the context in which MADRA came to be born. You will have seen the graphic pictures of our firestorm on the television all around the world, in fact. Luckily, in Mallacoota, we couldn't see ourselves because we didn't have any power or any electricity or any telly or any of those things for quite some time. However, my children and our grandchildren were out there in TV land, and my children were working very hard to protect our grandchildren from seeing what was going on in Mallacoota. Our road was closed for 39 days, and so the only way in or out of our town was by the good ship Choules or a Black Hawk helicopter. And that might sound exciting, but when you're in a post-bushfire traumatic situation and you've got your little children with you, a Black Hawk, I don't believe is fun. And so we live in around about 85,000 hectares of national park. That's why we live there. We love that. But 80% of it burned in the 1920 bushfires, and that left us in the middle of hundreds of kilometres of blackened, lunar-looking landscape, which was really quite a shocking thing to behold. And we knew that we were in the middle of a big mess and we were going to need a big solution for our little community. Our town was full of emergency vehicles, people in uniform, great big trucks and tanks and goodness knows. It was like Armageddon, really, to be honest. I can't explain what it was like. It was like the world as we knew it had ended overnight. And so that's what got us started on this journey that we took. And our context probably further contributed to what kept us going for 3 years. And that is that in winter, in our quiet season, we've only got a population of around about 1,000 people. In the summer, that swells to about 10,000 people. And of course, the bushfire happened right in midsummer when we were fully booked. And people have said, you know, why didn't all those people who were on holidays leave? Well, it wasn't really that simple. There was a warning, but by the time we had a warning, the road was already closed. And so I went fishing with my husband and my husband's mate, Puddles. And he was actually with us during the fire, which is kind of my context as well. He came to help us. He was actually dying of cancer at the time and he's since gone. But they call Puddles and my husband, used to call them my two husbands. And so we'd been out fishing that morning and I went down to the supermarket to get some things and everybody was clearly in a panic. And I said to somebody, what's going on? And they showed me their emergency services app and it said, there's a fire coming straight to your town and it's already too late to leave, the road is closed. And that was the first that we really knew. And so we had thousands upon thousands of people in town and a long, long road out that was already closed. And so the next emergency app message that I saw said, that the fire should be at the boundary of the town by daylight, which is roughly what happened. It was daylight for a couple of hours, and then it wasn't anymore. I'll get to that later. And so also our little town has a long road out, as I've said, and it's also heavily dependent on a couple of income streams such as abalone tourism and our summer tourist trade. So, during the course of this presentation, I don't want to sort of... At MADRA, we're very particular about our brand and the trust that's related to our brand, what we've created over the 3 years. We do like to stay well within the bounds of political correctness. We don't do mud throwing or placard waving. Having said that, I know that you didn't come here to see the political correct version of all of these events, and so I wouldn't patronise you by beating on around those things. I won't beat around the bush about some of the tough stuff, and so if I'm not being very PC at any time, I'll just apologise in advance. And so, over 3 years, I wish that clicker worked. I'll see if the clicker will work now that it's awake. Yep, now it does. And so, in the course of this presentation, there are some really big qualifiers that I will be wanting to talk about. And you might be wondering, is she trying to talk us out of this? And the answer is no, but there are some really big things to consider. Over the 3 years, we've learned that community-led recovery is ecological. You know, it grows from where we are. It is who we are. It's economical. It puts the right money in the hands of the right people, hopefully to make the right decisions as best they can. And we've found that it builds a collective consciousness about big ideas like consensus making. We were not good at that in the past. We were known for being pretty feisty in a stoush. We fought about a boat ramp for 30 long years. And so that was a big thing for us to learn how to do consensus. We had to learn about things that we can all live with, not the singular desires of a passionate group of people. And we had to learn what we collectively want and also don't want in our community. Somewhere along the way, I think we're also building our collective ability to face the future more connectedly, more bravely, more thoughtfully, more resiliently. And so, if you're considering for your community whether you'd like to take this very sort of down-to-earth little path, it's not an easy path, there's a lot of hard work, I'm sure you already know that. But why would you do that? Why on earth? and really it's all about what are the drivers that make this interesting for you? How should it look if you're involved in that? Oops. And what will take you down that path? Now for us, it was largely a question of self-determination. As I've told you, our community is remote. Our shire is 3 hours away through the forest. Our town could feel quite voiceless and powerless, and we definitely did not want to be told how to recover by someone from a capital city 6.5 hours away. Or our shire, distant enough as well. And so questions for you would be related, but not necessarily the same. I think that each recovery group should be absolutely unique to the place that it comes from. It should look exactly like its community does. And so some questions that you might ask yourself. Do you have issues around geography or topography? What are your people like? What are your people's skill sets and strengths? What are your people interested to learn about? Do you have time? Do you have the inclination and the energy? And what would you like to gain out of being community-led? And a bigger question there might be, do you have an important fish to fry? And in some communities, you may very well find that you do, whether it be about politics, whether it be about infrastructure, whether it be about innovation, the future, growth, development, all of those things. And so they're really kind of important questions to think about if you were planning to go to the sort of effort that's involved in leading your own community's recovery. Another question is, will you have the numbers? It's certainly a numbers game in a lot of ways. Are you looking for a process that brings your people together to create collaborative thinking, allows for a forward, future-focused ethos? And that brings me to one of the big qualifiers. This is only part of our mission and vision statement, but it's really important. If community-led recovery isn't thorough and it's not inclusive of everyone, then it's nothing at all. It is hot air and time wasting. If it's not everyone, then it's not changing your community, it's not representing. If it isn't everyone, or almost everyone, it doesn't have political clout and it doesn't have any pulling power. And they're really important things to reflect on. If you can't be prepared to put in the time and energy to be truly inclusive, not everybody will want to participate, but everybody needs to know that they've had their opportunity. They've had a chance to have a voice. And if it isn't thorough, in other words, it hasn't taken the time and effort to hear and record all the voices, and then put those voices back to the community and prioritise those important needs and ideas, then it isn't going to be part of a healing journey for your community. And if it isn't all of those things, it doesn't have moral authority. You can't choose actions based on what you think might be what your community needs. Oops. Two of them are stuck together. And so, there's another why. Again, forgive me if I'm not very PC right now. There's another big why. Why are local government and other organisations loving on community-led recovery so much? The rhetoric around community-led recovery is everywhere. It's in government publications. It's all over the place. But who's actually on the ground teaching communities how to do this thing? It's getting a lot of airtime out there. There are great reasons for doing it, and there are also some not so great reasons. Here's part of our mission. This is only part of our mission statement. Everyone in our community who needs bushfire assistance has received it. No one will have slipped between the cracks or have been left behind. I want somebody to bring me back to that comment at the end. Drag me back here and talk about that a little in your questions, perhaps. And so, I might be going to sound cynical, but let's face it. Community-led recovery for governments and other organisations is politically irresistible and newsworthy. It's just your made-to-order good news story. It's also a good way to burden shift a whole ton of difficult stuff. It's a terrific chance to cost downsize It potentially avoids a ton of decision-making fallout. It doesn't fall on the politicians anymore, it falls on us if we get something wrong. It gets volunteers to do a mountain of work that otherwise someone would have to be paid to do. Having said all that, and now I'm sorry if there's anyone in the room who's from local government and just wants to run away and hide right now. To be fair, our relationship with local government and other organisations is better now than it ever has been. Our community now has a voice. They have made a genuine effort to be involved, to listen to us, to try and do what the things that we want the way that we want them. There are huge limitations with this though, and there's the crux. If local governments want to have this bit of cake and eat it, that's okay, but it's only fair for communities to have equally big expectations in return. And that might include things like paid administration support, fair dinkum consultation, not the kind where you look at each other and you listen attentively and you listen and you talk and you listen and you talk and then you go, wait. Not that kind. I mean the kind that results in a road getting fixed or a building being built, and that building actually exists at the end of that process. That's the bit where things start to fall off. There's plenty of talking and listening out there, but when it comes to constructing a building or fixing a pothole in a road or getting rid of the burned up piles of debris that are still in place in some places, I think that the end of consultation is in the actions, not in all the talking and all the listening in the world. And so we're talking about the real outcomes at the end of those consultations. And there needs to be, and I'm not convinced this has happened yet, there needs to be a genuine effort to think through bureaucratic nonsense differently. The recovery landscape is not business as usual. It won't be business as usual for a long time, and the business as usual model frequently stymies recovery efforts. It gets right smack in the way. Bureaucratic thinking, policy cycles, funding cycles, all of those things. And I'm just going to talk about some examples here of where entrenched thinking needs to change. Oops, wrong arrow. Going in the wrong direction. Oh no. And so an example for us was this one. The stairs to our beach, our important beach. The surf beach, the beach where we teach our kids to swim, the beach we patrol, the beach where we all hang out and do all of our stuff. They were burned. And one of the most important things for us to have back was those. And we knew there was no way in a blue moon that the Shire or anyone else was going to get those stairs back in a timeline that worked for us. And so one of the things we had to do was pull our fingers out and rebuild those stairs ourselves. And we got some help from our local members and our local government, but if we'd left that to local government, those stairs probably wouldn't be back now, honestly. And so, what does this thing actually look like when you go around about doing it? And so that is the first community meeting. I'll just give you a really short history of MADRA. Immediately post-fire, like in literally days, a group of our wise people, can't think of a term that would encompass all of them. I should have asked them, shouldn't I? My bad. They called themselves the Thinking Group. They never intended to be part of MADRA. They never put their hands up. They just said, we're just going to get this going and put some thinking around it and then hand it over to whoever. So they got together and they started a conversation about our town's recovery and what some other towns had done in 2009. And so 2 weeks past the fire, this is astonishingly fast when you consider what was going on in our lives, they met with a larger group, and that consisted of the presidents or a nominee of the presidents of the leadership of all of the community groups that currently existed. So the president of the Lions Club and the president of the golf club and the whoever and all those people. That was one of the things that we got right, which I'll talk about a bit more as well later. By February the 2nd, we held a community meeting and we invited Steve Pascoe, who made a presentation about the recovery of Strathewen post-2009. We didn't follow the Strathewen model, but it was really helpful for us to just see something that another town had done. It was really helpful of us to look at what Strathewen had done and think about, well, what could apply to us here? On February the 4th, we had a whole of community meeting, that's this meeting here, at the Mallacoota Golf Club. For Mallacoota to get that many people in one room at a time just speaks for itself. That meeting was to discuss whether there was interest in leading our own recovery, and the result was unanimously yes. And then COVID happened. Terrific. May 21st saw the finalisation of the Australian Electoral Commission's election of our first committee of 12 members, who were chosen from a panel of 44 nominees. I don't know how the AEC got roped into this. That must have been an insider job. I know why it was a great choice, because our community would not have got behind a committee that they felt was gratuitous or self-elected or self-nominated. Never. That would never have happened. And so we had a full-on election. You'll get to see a ballot paper a bit later on. It's hilarious. And so our MADRA was formed following that election. It currently sits at around 800 members, which is basically every living, breathing grown-up in our town. On June the 9th, our office bearers were elected. And after that, canvassing the town people for their thoughts, interests, aspirations began. Because of COVID, that was painstakingly slow and difficult. We couldn't have community meetings. We couldn't get together in a room and say, well, what do we need? What's urgent? What's important? What are we going to do next? We couldn't do that. And so the community had to send in their thoughts. And then we had to send them back out so that community could vote to prioritise those things. And so they were compiled into a voting report, which was also a huge beast at the time. That voting report and the writing of the recovery plan, giving credit to the members of committee number 1 and Jenny Lloyd in particular, this was supported by some consultancy from BRV, which was probably not the best idea in hindsight. Having a consultant involved in writing the recovery plan and the voting report drew things away from where, I guess it put a couple of steps too many in the chain, and it made it hard to get the voting report and the recovery plan to come back to exactly what we wanted to say from the grassroots level. And so we ended up with a recovery plan which is 170 pages long. Have we all read it? Well, probably not. But you know, everybody kind of sort of knows what it says. Everybody knows they had a chance to speak. And it's really important to have something to refer back to when you need to make decisions about stuff. You've got to be able to go back to, well, what did our community say to us? That's essential. And so by the end of the year, MADRA was a fully fledged committee. We had were incorporated, we had DGR status, insurance, all the relevant things. Kate can talk about those things way better than me, because that's just not my cup of tea. But that's a really important consideration. How is this going to be structured? How does it need to be structured in order to meet the needs that the community has, in order to meet the skills that the community has, in order to achieve what the community wants to achieve? That could be a really simple thing, or it could be a really, really complicated thing. Ours is somewhere in the middle. goodness, I'm talking a lot, aren't I? So, let me just move right along. There's our first chair, David. Now, a couple of notes about emergency timing, and that is that everything can be too fast and too slow all at once. That's one of the places where a recovery committee becomes critically important. Sometimes you need to slow everything down. Sometimes you need to jump in front of the train on behalf of people who aren't ready to jump in front of the train themselves. And what about the doing? No one's around to teach you how to do this. In the time after an emergency, everyone is impacted. Everyone feels lost, like you've lost everything that you had, that you knew. Life is so changed. Everyone is impacted. But some people come out the other end of the emergency with a bed to sleep in. They're safe. Some people are a little more able to put two thoughts together than others. If that's you, don't be shy about stepping up, because you might be the person who's needed. The people who are close to the community but not so impacted that you can't step up. Your community must be representative, but it must avoid doing representation. Oh, I forgot to say something really important just then, and that is in that time when it feels like everything is lost, ruined, destroyed, life as you knew it is over. What you actually need is there in spades. It's there in the spirit of your people, and it's possibly growing exponentially. It's their leadership, it's their strength, it's their hope. The thing that you actually need. It looks like you need all the other things like houses and shops and trucks and all the things, but what you really need is within your people, and that's still there, and it's there in spades. And so you might be able to streamline the process of creating this beast better than we did, and certainly we were hampered by COVID. I just want to talk a little bit about representation, because this is important. Your committee must be representative, but it must not be doing representation. That sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? You need to be representative in terms of representing all of the diversity of the members of your community. But once you start doing the jobs, you have to leave your representation, your passion projects at the door. There is only one intention that you can come to community-led recovery with, and that is the intention to advocate for and implement what your community has asked you for. There's our ballot paper, isn't it gorgeous? I wish I kept mine, it's such a cracker. And so it's really hard sometimes to avoid doing representation. What I've seen in working with lots of CRCs is if you have a lot of people in that room doing representation, what you can end up with is some really nasty, factionalised fighting, some really divisive things going on. And there's lots of ways in which community-led recovery can potentially become a train wreck. And so for us, it's been important to not only have the plan and go back to the plan again and again, but also to know that we have to leave our other hats at the door, declare our conflicts of interest, and get behind that one goal, that one intention, which is to implement what we've been asked for. And so I'm not saying people are coming to it with bad intentions, just coming to it with the wrong ones. Oh, I want to fix the pony club. I want to fix the art space. I want to get the such and such rebuilt. They may be part of the plan, but if somebody's coming with a project of wanting to implement that thing, then you can end up with a whole lot of different people trying to represent one interest above other interests, and then you can be creating something that's quite divisive and quite damaging. And so the future of MADRA? We don't really know. So because we're elected every year, the community have to express an interest in us continuing. They have to rock up to the AGM. So far they have.